He fired me on Monday at 10:43 a.m. And by Friday, 3 top clients had already terminated their contracts with them. I joined this company when I was 24. I still wore black ballet flats, smiled too much, and said, "Thank you," after every interruption. Back then, I thought that if you were loyal, smart, and a little quieter than everyone else, you'd get noticed. That you could earn respect through hard work. That if you didn't make mistakes, didn't complain, and were easy to work with, you wouldn't be betrayed. I lived within those walls for 25 years. I raised that department. I was the backbone, the archive, the living memory of everything that happened. I knew clients by their children's names. I corrected other people's mistakes until dawn. I never took sick leave. And then one day they just got rid of me. No reason, no goodbye, no thank you. Just silence. Just HR with cold eyes and a box for my personal belongings, as if I had died. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I wasn't even surprised. You know, when everything collapses not loudly, but as if it were planned in advance, it means you've been ignoring the cracks for too long. But none of them knew that they weren't just firing an employee. They crossed out. A person who knew how to wait. Calmly, silently, with a cool head, and with a memory far more accurate than any CRM system. It took me 4 days to realize something. Justice doesn't come on its own. You have to invite it, or call it. The first thing you should know is that people like me are called invisible. I was too old to be promising, and too feminine to be authoritative. In the eyes of the new management, I was just Emma, the one who was always there, the one who would fix things, not complain, not cry in the bathroom. When Douglas Sinclair joined the company, we immediately felt a change. The air in the office became thinner somehow. He spoke smoothly, smiled a little longer than necessary, and always remembered only the names of the men. At meetings, he presented my projects as his own, or, at best, as teamwork, although the team was me. He started by firing 3 senior managers. Then he cut our annual bonus. He said, "We have to be flexible. A new era is dawning." And then he started coming to me with questions. On Fridays, late at night, when no one else was in the office. "Emma, you're the only one who knows where the old contract with McNally Corp. is. Emma, only you can find the password to the 2009 database." I helped. Of course I helped. It was my job. I knew he didn't respect me, but respect wasn't why I stayed. I stayed for the people, for those who trusted me, for the clients who called me instead of the general department, who wrote, "Emma, can we discuss this in person?" But Douglas didn't believe in relationships. He believed in metrics, in charts, in words like optimization and consolidation. And one morning, he walked into my office not with a question, but with HR. When they fired me, I didn't say a word. But one person called me 2 days later, and everything changed. It was Simon Hayes, a major client I had been working with for the past 12 years. He didn't know I'd been fired. He just wrote, "Hi, Emma. I can't seem to get through to you. I have a question about the quarterly report. Can we talk today?" I wanted to respond, politely, briefly, vaguely, but suddenly, I felt angry. Not at him, but at the fact that I still felt I had to be accommodating. I wrote, "I was fired. You should contact Douglas. I no longer represent the company." 2 hours later, it wasn't him who called me, but his personal assistant. "He's furious," she said. "He said it's absurd. He said it's either you or them." I didn't know what to say. I really hadn't planned anything. Not yet. But by the end of the week, 3 more people had written to me. Then 5. Then one client simply stated that he would not work with the company without me. And I suddenly realized all my invisible work was visible to them. It's not just orders. It's trust. It's personal. And Douglas had no idea that building a spreadsheet in Excel wasn't the same as building a relationship with a CEO who trusts you with his funds data while he's in intensive care. I didn't do anything proactively. I didn't call. I didn't write. I didn't ask. I just didn't get in the way of what he had built. And it started falling apart, alarmingly quickly. When client number 7 asked me out for coffee, I realized it wasn't just sympathy anymore. It was an invitation to come back. But on different terms. Maybe you'd consider private consulting? We'd be happy to switch to you directly. It was my 8th client, not the biggest, but very loyal. And in that moment, I felt choice. Not a fleeting resentment, not the reflex of a humiliated employee, but real power. I didn't want revenge. Revenge is a cry, and I wasn't crying anymore. I wanted to hurt in silence. I created a separate email address. I bought a domain, not for business, for silence. So I would have space to think. I analyzed all the clients I'd worked with over the past 25 years. I divided them into levels of trust, dependence, and strategic importance. Some were closely tied to my expertise. Others were tied to my personality. I made a list of those who might not leave right away, but would, eventually. And then, something happened that I couldn't have predicted. One of the company's junior analysts wrote to me anonymously. "I'm sorry you were let go. I saw the numbers. They started falling in the 2nd week. Management is panicking. Douglas is yelling at everyone. If you need anything, I'm here to help." I didn't reply, but I saved the email. It got worse. 2 former employees approached me. One had been pushed out during a merger. The other, fired after maternity leave. We met at a coffee shop. We sat down, in silence. And 10 minutes later, we had a common understanding. We weren't being purged by accident. We were being systematically replaced by cheaper, more obedient, less lively people. We didn't start shouting. We started counting asterisk. Spreadsheets, lost contracts, mistakes in tenders, missed deadlines. And I knew we had everything we needed to, no, not to destroy them. Just to let them drown in their own self-confidence. We didn't plan destruction. We just decided not to cover up their mistakes anymore. It happened in the middle of the 3rd week. I woke up at 6:17 a.m., as usual. I checked my email, as usual. And there it was, a message. "We have an emergency. One of our biggest clients has left us for a private consultant. We suspect it was you. A lawyer will be in touch." I didn't respond, not because I was scared, but because all they could prove was that a client had left. You can't stop people from going to someone they trust. That same day, Simon Hayes called me, the same guy who started all this. "Emma," he said, "they asked me to sign a loyalty agreement." Can you imagine? It's like we're in school. I didn't say anything. I refused, and by the way, you have 3 more meetings next week. They're ready to work with you directly. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. By the end of the week, I had signed my first private agreement, on terms I would never have agreed to while working for that company. I didn't ask, they offered. And I realized my name worked better than their logo. At the same time, I received another message from inside the company. Marketing is draining the budget. Douglas canceled 2 projects because of external risks. In reality, it's because the contractors left. They went to you, didn't they? I didn't respond. Panic had broken out inside the company. I knew it, without words. When emails start arriving at 2:47 a.m., that's an alarm bell. They tried to cover their tracks. They came up with internal restructuring. They blamed the external market. They canceled the corporate party. But it was already too late. By the time their most unsinkable client left, I was already sitting in the meeting room of the new office, with a view of the river. My business card was lying on the table. It had my name on it, no title, no brand, just me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like an ex. I felt like a beginner. But even then, I wasn't happy. Because it was only superficial. And underneath, I was hiding something that could not only destroy the company, it could expose everything. This letter came from a personal email account. I know you no longer work with them, but I need someone to see this. Attached were 7 files, financial reports, internal briefings, excerpts from correspondence. I opened the first one. 10 minutes later, I felt cold. These documents contained numbers, distortions. They were attributing the income of subsidiaries to themselves. They were running budgets through fictitious contractors. They were using an offshore scheme to hide bonuses for top managers. And there was a name, my name. In one document, I was listed as the confirming auditor for an audit I had never even seen. I realized they hadn't just fired me. They were cleaning house, getting rid of those who remembered, and using signatures that no one would check, because Emma would never betray them. But now, I was out of the system, and that meant I was out of their control. I sent the files to myself. Then I made a backup copy, then another one, and another. I knew I had to act, quietly and correctly. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted it to be clean. So that when they fell, no one could say it was revenge. It was the truth. And the truth is far more dangerous than revenge. A week later, I met with the company's former lawyer. We sat in the car, in silence. She looked at the printouts, and she simply said, "We can pass this on, but only if you're prepared to go all the way." I stared at the windshield. The streets were empty, as if the whole world had held its breath. I don't want to destroy them. What do you want? I want them to never be able to say, "We didn't know" again. I thought the most dangerous part was behind me. But the hardest part begins when you decide not to stay silent. The first warning came almost immediately. In the event of disclosure of corporate information, the company reserves the right. Standard threat. Legal mumbo-jumbo. I wasn't even scared. But a day later, someone scratched my car in the parking lot. A week later, the bank temporarily suspended my account, requested through a business partner. And then, a phone call. "Emma, this is Charles from the board. You know I've always respected you. Douglas is under pressure right now, but let's not make a big deal out of this. We can work something out." I listened, silently. "You'll get compensation, a lot, no court, just sign an NDA. An NDA is a document that prohibits you from speaking. It prohibits you from remembering. It prohibits you from breathing." And then, for the first time in a long time, I felt weak. I was sitting in my kitchen. Everything was familiar. The mug, the teapot, the chair with the crack in the leg. And yet, It was as if I was back in that office where I was fired. I already knew what it was like to be convenient, to be quiet, to be the one who was easier to get rid of than to listen to. But I also knew what it was like to lose my voice, and I chose to keep it. I called my lawyer. File everything. 3 days later, the documents were sent to the audit department. 7 days later, to the tax office. On the 8th day, I got a call from someone I didn't expect to hear from. Emma, it's Annabelle. She was my deputy, the one they put in my place, young, energetic. I never blamed her. I didn't know they forged your signatures. I didn't know they fired you because of the audit. I'm sorry. I was silent, again. But now I know, and if you need me, I'll testify. Sometimes, justice doesn't require a revolution. It just needs someone to stand up and say, I remember, I saw, I won't be silent. It's amazing how life can simultaneously contract and expand. When I submitted my documents, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no music, no fanfare, no final frame. There was only silence and coffee. I sat by the window of my office, no longer rented, no longer someone else's. And suddenly, I realized I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of failure. I wasn't afraid of success. I wasn't afraid of being alone. There was something almost sacred in that strange, fragile peace. Perhaps for the first time in 25 years, I didn't feel like I belonged to anyone. I wasn't part of a structure. I wasn't a function. I wasn't a backdrop for other people's decisions. I was myself. Women started writing to me. Some had heard about the case through corporate circles, some from former colleagues. I worked under Sinclair. He's just like you described. I was also fired, in silence. Thank you for speaking out. I didn't reply to everyone, but I read every single one. And then Sarah wrote to me, my daughter. Mom, you never said you were afraid. I always thought you were just strong. Now I see you were strong because you were afraid, but you didn't give up. Thank you for that. And you know, that was the moment that broke me, in a good way. Because all my life, I was afraid my daughter would see weakness in me. But it turned out, that was my strength. Not that I didn't cry, but that I kept going, even when I didn't believe that anyone needed it. And now I knew. It was necessary. First and foremost, for me. But the world doesn't like it when women become free. It will always find a way to test whether you've really stood up for yourself. And that test caught up with me at the most unexpected moment. He entered without warning. My assistant was on vacation. The door was unlocked. I looked up from my laptop and saw him. Douglas Sinclair. He looked exhausted. Not defeated, no, but like a man who had just read all the documents he used to approve by skimming through them. He sat down across from me. No invitation, no explanation. You got what you wanted, he said. I looked at him for a long time. Then I simply said, No, that's not what I wanted. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm going to lose everything. So am I, only sooner. He looked away, and in that moment, I knew. He had never thought of me as a person. He thought I was a system, emotionless, invisible, self-sustaining. You could have just left, he said, his voice almost sincere. We would have paid you. You always tried to solve everything with money. I wasn't angry. I didn't want to humiliate him. I just looked at the man who never understood what he had lost. You fired me, Douglas. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. He looked up. I was afraid of you. The words hung in the air. He didn't say them as a confession. He said them like an excuse to himself. Because I knew how things worked? Because you knew how things should be. And suddenly, I felt something like forgiveness. Not for him, but for myself, the person I used to be, the one still hoping for an explanation from him. You know what's going to happen now, don't you? I asked. Yes. He stood up. You were better than all of us. We just realized it, too late. He left. And I was left behind, not a winner, not a hero, just a woman who survived, and who no longer asks for permission to be herself. After that meeting, I understood the most important thing. I didn't destroy him. He did that himself. And I just stopped covering up his weakness. I don't have a title right now. No uniform, no wall with corporate awards. But I do have a name, and a choice of what that name stands for. I have a small office, a few clients, 2 assistants, whom I don't give motivational speeches to. I just give them space to be themselves. And you know what? None of them call me boss. They just say, "Thanks, Emma." I'm not building an empire. I'm not looking for fame. I'm just creating a place where women aren't afraid to be smart, loud, different. Sometimes I still dream about those years. Long corridors, coffee on the run, spreadsheets, meetings. Sometimes I wake up thinking, what if I had said no sooner? And then I look at the window, at the patch of sunlight on the floor, at my own desk. And I realize everything happened exactly as it was meant to. Because justice is not retribution. It's when you get your face back. And I got mine back. Without screaming, without revenge, without malice. Just by allowing myself to be who I always was. Uncomfortable, knowing, and free.